Alex Harper's heart raced as he lay on the forest floor, still dizzy from the fall. He tried to move, but the world around him spun. Then, he froze. Slowly, he lifted his eyes to see what surrounded him. There they were, 5 thoroughbreds. Wild, majestic creatures, their sleek coats glowing in the dim light of the forest. They stood perfectly still, forming a circle around him. Alex could feel their presence, powerful and silent. These weren't just any horses. They were the legendary wild thoroughbreds that had been spotted around these woods for years. No one had ever gotten close to them, and yet, here they were, surrounding him like they were guarding something. He didn't know how long he had been unconscious or how he ended up on the ground, but one thing was clear: he wasn't alone. The horses didn't seem afraid. They didn't run off like wild animals would. Instead, they stood there, watching him with intense eyes, their heads lowered slightly as if they were studying him. But what made the moment even more terrifying wasn't just the fact that he was surrounded by these wild animals. It was the eerie silence. The usual sounds of the forest, birds, insects, the wind, had disappeared. It was as if the whole forest was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Then, a low growl echoed from the shadows, sending a chill down Alex's spine. The horses didn't flinch. They didn't move. They just stood there, like protectors, ready for whatever was coming next. Alex realized that whatever danger was lurking in the woods, these thoroughbreds were ready to face it. But would they protect him? Or was he just another part of their wild, untamed world? Alex Harper had always felt at home in the woods. A forest ranger by profession, he spent most of his days alone, patrolling the vast stretches of land that made up the wildlife reserve in the heart of the Appalachians. The serenity of the forest, with its towering trees and quiet trails, had always been his refuge. The air was fresh, crisp with the scent of pine and earth. The birds, the rustling leaves, and the occasional sound of a distant stream were the only company he needed. It was simple, peaceful, and, most importantly, safe. Or so he thought. This particular day had started like any other. The sun was barely breaking through the thick canopy of trees above as Alex loaded up his gear and set out for his usual patrol. He had been monitoring this area for months, watching for signs of illegal poaching or disturbances in the ecosystem. Nothing too dramatic, just the routine checks and the occasional clearing of fallen trees or debris blocking the trail. But today, something felt off. A strange stillness hung in the air, unlike the usual calm of the forest. The wind barely stirred, and even the birds seemed to have fallen silent. Alex shook off the unease, telling himself it was just his imagination. After all, he had spent enough time in these woods to know that sometimes nature had a way of shifting its rhythm without warning. As he walked deeper into the forest, he checked his surroundings, making sure everything was as it should be. His boots crunched against the dry leaves, but there was something about the sound that felt too loud in the quiet forest. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He came to a clearing, a place he had passed through countless times, and stopped dead in his tracks. There, in the center of the clearing, was a figure that shouldn't have been there. It was a horse. A large, powerful thoroughbred, its coat a brilliant shade of chestnut that seemed to shimmer in the light. But what caught Alex off guard wasn't just the horse itself. It was the fact that it was alone, standing perfectly still as if it were waiting for something. Or someone. Alex knew this forest well, and he knew the horses that roamed it. For years, there had been rumors of wild thoroughbreds that lived in the remote parts of the reserve. They were legends, creatures so elusive that no one had ever managed to catch a glimpse of them. Local stories spoke of them as mythical beings, almost like ghosts, roaming the woods with their untamed grace. Most rangers dismissed these tales as nothing more than tall stories. But Alex wasn't so sure anymore. He had heard whispers, seen the occasional hoofprint, and caught glimpses of movement in the distance. The horses were real. But how had this one gotten so close to him? As Alex stood there, observing the horse, he noticed something odd. The animal didn't seem nervous or frightened, as most wild horses would be. It stood perfectly still, its large dark eyes locked onto Alex's. There was an almost eerie calm about it, as if it wasn't bothered by his presence at all. The forest around him seemed to hold its breath, the usual hum of nature absent, as if the world itself had paused to witness this strange encounter. Alex took a tentative step forward, his boots silent on the soft earth. The horse didn't move. He took another step. Then another. Slowly, he closed the distance between them. His heart beat faster, unsure whether to approach or retreat. But something inside him, something primal, urged him forward. He had always felt a deep connection with animals, especially the wild ones, and there was something about this horse that felt different, almost familiar. Just as he was within arm's reach, a low sound broke the silence, a soft snort. Alex froze, his hand still extended toward the horse. The animal's ears flicked back, then forward again, its nostrils flaring as it took a deep breath. It was as if it was sizing him up, deciding whether he posed any threat. Alex held his breath, unsure of what to do next. He had been trained to approach wildlife with caution, to respect their space. But this horse wasn't acting like the others he had encountered in the past. There was no fear in its gaze, no hesitation. It was almost as if the horse was inviting him into its world. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the woods, breaking the spell. The horse's head jerked up, its ears twitching. Alex spun around, instinctively reaching for the radio on his belt, but before he could speak, a blur of movement caught his eye. More horses. 2, 3, no, 4 more thoroughbreds emerged from the shadows of the forest, stepping into the clearing with the same silent grace as the first. They moved together, seamlessly, like a well-coordinated team. The ground seemed to tremble under their hooves as they approached, their dark eyes fixed on Alex. His pulse quickened. What was going on? These weren't normal horses. This was something entirely different. They weren't afraid of him. They weren't running away. Instead, they seemed to be watching him. The hairs on the back of his neck prickled as the horses slowly closed in around him, their gazes unblinking. They formed a tight circle, surrounding him without making a sound. Alex stood motionless, his mind racing. How had they gotten here? Why were they surrounding him like this? The stories he had heard as a child flashed through his mind. The wild thoroughbreds were rumored to be guardians of the forest, elusive and untamable, watching over the land with a fierce protectiveness. But no one had ever seen them this closely. No one had ever witnessed their behavior. They were ghosts, myths that existed only in whispers. And yet, here they were, surrounding him, making him feel like he was the one who didn't belong. For a moment, everything went still. The world around Alex seemed to stop, as if the horses had taken control of the very air he breathed. He could hear the soft rustling of leaves, the distant sound of a bird calling somewhere far off. But even those sounds felt muted, drowned out by the intensity of the moment. Then, suddenly, a deep growl cut through the silence. Alex's heart skipped a beat. The horses didn't flinch. They didn't move a muscle. They just stood there, their eyes trained on him. But now, there was something else in the forest, something that wasn't so calm, so quiet. Something that was coming for them all. Alex felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Whatever was out there, the horses weren't afraid of it. In fact, it seemed as if they were preparing for something. The question that ran through Alex's mind was simple. Why was he here? What did these wild thoroughbreds want from him? And most importantly, what was about to happen next? The growl grew louder, closer. It was almost as if the forest itself was warning him. But the horses stood firm, unwavering, their eyes still locked on him. Would they protect him? Would they help him face whatever danger was lurking in the woods? Or was he just an intruder in a world he didn't understand? And then, in the distance, Alex saw it, a shadow moving swiftly between the trees, heading straight for the clearing. The horses were ready. Alex was about to find out just how much danger he was really in, and whether these wild, untamed creatures would be the key to his survival. The air in the clearing was thick with tension. Alex's heart pounded against his chest as the horses circled around him, their eyes locked on his every movement. The growl, low and guttural, echoed once more from the depths of the forest. It was coming closer. Whatever it wasn't just a passing animal. It was something bigger, something that had a presence of its own, something dangerous. Alex glanced at the horses. They stood poised, alert, yet completely calm. The eerie stillness around him only made the atmosphere feel heavier, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. The thoroughbreds, though magnificent in their size and strength, seemed oddly prepared. It was as if they had faced something like this before, and Alex was just an outsider, caught up in their world. One of the horses, the largest of the group, took a step forward. Its coat gleamed under the filtered sunlight, the muscles in its neck rippling with every movement. Alex held his ground, even though his instincts screamed for him to run. He had never seen these horses up close, never imagined they would behave so calmly in such a terrifying situation. The rest of the herd moved as if on cue, following the lead of the alpha horse, and spread out around him, forming an impenetrable barrier between him and whatever lay in the shadows. Then, a snap of branches broke the silence, followed by the unmistakable crunch of heavy footsteps. Alex's eyes darted to the trees, his breath caught in his throat. Something was there, something massive, pushing its way through the underbrush. His first thought was that it was a bear, but the growl was too deep for any bear he had ever encountered. And the movement, the way the creature moved with purpose and intelligence, didn't fit the pattern of a typical forest predator. Suddenly, from the thicket emerged a creature that defied logic. It was huge, far larger than any animal Alex had ever seen in the woods. Its body was long, sleek, and covered in dark, matted fur. Its head was the size of a boulder, with glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through the haze of the forest. The creature's growl sent a shiver down Alex's spine. It wasn't just hungry. It was angry, driven by something much deeper than the need for food. Alex's first instinct was to reach for his radio, but his hand stopped halfway. The horses didn't move. They didn't flinch or show any sign of fear. It was almost as if they were waiting, preparing for something. As if they were the ones in control. The creature, now clearly visible in the clearing, paused. Its gaze shifted from the horses to Alex. Its eyes were wild, but there was something oddly calculating about them, as if it knew exactly what was happening, as if it understood the role it was playing in this strange, almost unnatural encounter. The growl it emitted was louder this time, reverberating in the air and rattling the trees around them. Alex swallowed hard, trying to keep his breathing steady. His mind raced. What was this thing? Why wasn't it attacking? It could have easily overpowered him, torn through the horses like they were nothing. And yet, it stood there, watching, calculating, waiting for something. The horses stood their ground. The alpha, the largest of the thoroughbreds, stepped forward again, slowly, deliberately. It lowered its head, nostrils flaring as it sized up the creature in front of them. Alex felt a strange sense of calm wash over him, even though every cell in his body screamed that he was in danger. These horses weren't just animals. They were something more, something ancient and powerful. The creature took another step forward, its massive paws sinking into the soft earth with each movement. Alex could feel the ground tremble slightly with its weight. The horses didn't move, but their bodies tensed, muscles rippling beneath their coats as they prepared for whatever was coming next. The alpha horse snorted, its breath coming in short, controlled bursts. It wasn't just waiting for the creature to make the first move. It was sizing it up, preparing to fight if necessary. Alex's eyes flicked between the horses and the creature, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know what was going to happen next, but he knew that he had to trust these animals. They had a purpose here. And somehow, Alex had become a part of that purpose. The creature growled once more, its eyes narrowing as it assessed the situation. And then, in a move that took Alex completely by surprise, the creature charged. Its speed was breathtaking, a blur of fur and muscle, heading straight for the alpha horse. Alex's stomach dropped. This was it. The moment he had been dreading. But the horses didn't panic. They didn't scatter. Instead, they moved together, synchronized, like a single force of nature. The alpha horse lowered its head, charging toward the creature with a terrifying, graceful power. The ground seemed to shake as they collided, the sound of hooves striking the earth like thunder. The horses moved as one, surrounding the creature, pushing it back into the forest with swift, coordinated movements. Alex watched, wide-eyed, as the horses fought not with brute force, but with precision, each movement a part of a larger, unspoken plan. The creature howled in frustration, its enormous form retreating back into the woods, but it wasn't finished. It lingered on the edge of the clearing, growling, watching, waiting for another opportunity to strike. But the horses had shown it something. They were not afraid. They were not backing down. And neither was Alex. The alpha horse, having made its point, slowly turned its head to look at Alex. Its dark eyes held a strange wisdom, a knowing that sent a chill through him. It was as if it had seen something in him, something worth protecting. The other horses had begun to back away, their movements synchronized, as if retreating into the shadows from where they had come. The creature in the forest growled one last time, then disappeared into the trees, its presence fading as quickly as it had arrived. Alex stood there, breathing heavily, his mind reeling from the encounter. His body trembled with adrenaline, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something had just happened, something that would change everything. The horses had protected him, yes, but it was more than that. They had proven their strength, their unity. And they had shown him that the world he knew, the forest he had always felt safe in, was not as simple as it seemed. As the last echoes of the creature's growl faded into the distance, Alex felt the weight of the moment settle over him. The forest, once a place of solitude and peace, now seemed different. It felt alive in a way he had never understood before. The wild thoroughbreds weren't just myths or legends, they were guardians of this land. And Alex had been tested in a way he could never have anticipated. The question remained, though, was this the last test? Or had he only just begun to understand what it meant to be part of their world? The days that followed felt like a blur for Alex. His mind couldn't quite catch up with what had happened in the forest. The horses, their strength, the creature, the raw, primal power that had been displayed before him. It was all too much to process. And yet, every time he closed his eyes, he saw their faces, the thoroughbreds' eyes, calm and unyielding. It was as though he had stepped into a world that didn't belong to him, a world where the rules of nature were rewritten, where the line between predator and prey blurred. Still, Alex kept moving forward, doing his best to shake off the feeling of dread that hung over him like a thick fog. He spent the next few days back at his camp, trying to regain some semblance of normalcy, but the eerie events in the forest had left their mark. It was as if the forest was holding its breath, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. One afternoon, while he was inspecting his equipment, something caught his eye, a small trail of broken branches leading deeper into the woods. It was fresh, the sharp edges still visible, and it looked as though something had pushed through in a hurry. His heart skipped a beat. The creature. It was back. Without thinking, Alex grabbed his gear, the weight of the situation settling over him like a cold shroud. The horses had driven the creature away before, but he didn't know if they would be able to do it again. The forest had a way of changing quickly, and the unknown loomed ahead like a storm cloud waiting to burst. As he made his way into the woods, the familiar sounds of nature, the chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves, seemed to fade into an unsettling silence. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up as he ventured further into the dense trees. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that eyes were following his every move. Was it the creature? Or something else? The trail of broken branches led him to a small clearing, one he hadn't come across before. It was eerily quiet, and the dense foliage seemed to close in around him. The sunlight barely filtered through the canopy above, casting long shadows that made the place feel even more isolated. Alex's gut twisted. Something wasn't right. His hand tightened around the grip of his rifle, though he knew it was of little use in the face of whatever lay ahead. He had learned that much during the encounter with the creature. Weapons weren't going to protect him here. It was something else that would see him through. And then he saw it. The creature was back, but this time it was not alone. A smaller figure emerged from the shadows, a different creature, more lithe and quick, its fur blending seamlessly with the underbrush. Alex's pulse quickened. These were no ordinary forest creatures. There was something about their movements, their coordination, that made his blood run cold. It wasn't just a hunt for food. This was something more organized, more methodical. And Alex was the target. Before he could react, the smaller creature darted toward him, its eyes glowing with malice. It was fast, too fast for him to dodge, and in an instant, it was on him, pinning him to the ground. The weight of it was suffocating, and Alex's breath was knocked from his lungs as his back hit the cold, hard earth. The creature snarled, its sharp claws scraping against his jacket as it tried to find purchase. Alex's mind raced, but his body was slower than the creature's. He managed to wriggle one arm free, grabbing for his knife, but it felt like an eternity. The creature's jaws snapped dangerously close to his face, and the stench of its breath was overpowering. It was like being trapped in the jaws of a nightmare. Just as the creature's teeth were about to sink into his throat, there was a sound, loud, sharp, and unmistakable. A scream that echoed through the trees, followed by the pounding of hooves. The horses. They were here. Out of nowhere, the thoroughbreds appeared, charging into the clearing with incredible speed. Alex could hear their hooves hitting the ground like thunder, their powerful bodies cutting through the forest with ease. The small creature screeched in surprise, its eyes wide with fear as the alpha horse, the same one that had protected Alex before, barreled toward it. Without hesitation, the alpha horse slammed into the smaller creature, knocking it off Alex with a force that sent it sprawling. The creature scrambled to its feet, but the thoroughbred was relentless. It wasn't just fighting, it was defending something, or someone. Alex. The horse reared back and kicked with deadly precision, striking the creature with its hooves. The smaller creature howled in pain, but it wasn't defeated yet. It lunged at the horse, but the alpha moved swiftly, ducking beneath its strike and launching another attack. The other horses followed, forming a circle around Alex, ensuring that the creature couldn't escape or return. Alex scrambled to his feet, his legs shaky, his heart still pounding in his chest. The sound of the fight echoed in his ears, but he couldn't look away from the chaos unfolding before him. The horses were moving as one, their strength and unity nothing short of awe-inspiring. It was a battle of survival, but it felt like something deeper, something instinctive and ancient. The alpha horse managed to land a final blow, striking the creature with a powerful kick that sent it crashing into the trees. It lay motionless, its chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. The horses circled it, wary but victorious. But Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this was only a temporary victory. The creatures weren't just wild animals. They were part of something much larger, something that Alex didn't fully understand. He had been lucky this time, but what about the next time? The thoroughbreds stood still, their bodies still tense, their eyes scanning the forest for any signs of danger. They had proven their strength, but Alex felt a deeper unease settle over him. This wasn't just about him anymore. The forest had its own set of rules, its own logic, and Alex was only beginning to realize how deeply he was entangled in it. With the immediate threat neutralized, Alex took a step back, his thoughts racing. He had survived. But for how long? And what other challenges lay ahead? As the horses moved away, slowly, almost cautiously, Alex knew that this was just the beginning. He had been tested once, but now he was about to face something much greater, a force that he could not control. The forest was no longer just a backdrop. It was alive, and it had chosen him. The next chapter had only just begun. The days after the encounter with the creature were a blur of anxiety and uncertainty. Alex knew the forest was no longer just a place to watch from the sidelines. It was a battleground, and he was right in the middle of it. The thoroughbreds had protected him, but that didn't mean they would always be there. The creatures in the woods, those feral, primal beings, were just the beginning. Something bigger, something more dangerous, was lurking in the shadows, and Alex had no idea what to expect next. For a while, he thought about leaving. He had the option, the chance to turn back and go home. He had seen the danger, he had felt it firsthand. But there was something inside him, something he couldn't explain, that kept him rooted to the spot. The connection he had with the horses, the way they had fought for him, was too strong to ignore. It was as if he had become part of their world, and once you're in, there's no going back. But this wasn't about just surviving anymore. This was about understanding. Understanding why the horses fought for him, why the forest was so dangerous, and what it all meant in the grand scheme of things. Alex had always been a man of logic, of reason. But this place, this wild, untamed forest, was testing everything he thought he knew about the world. The next few weeks were spent training. Alex worked alongside the thoroughbreds, not just watching them, but learning from them. They were incredibly intelligent creatures, their instincts honed by generations of survival in the wild. They knew how to navigate the forest, how to fight, how to listen to the unspoken language of nature. And somehow, Alex felt that he could learn that language too. Every morning, he would saddle up one of the thoroughbreds and ride deep into the woods. It wasn't just about physical endurance, it was about tuning into the rhythm of the forest. The trees, the underbrush, the sky above, all of it held secrets, and the horses seemed to know them all. The way they moved, how they communicated with each other, how they reacted to the smallest shifts in the environment. It was all part of a larger pattern that Alex had to figure out. The first few rides were difficult. Alex struggled to keep up with the horses, his mind constantly wandering back to the danger he had faced. His confidence wavered. He was still afraid of what he didn't understand. But with every ride, every moment he spent in the saddle, he began to feel a little more at home. The horses weren't just his protectors, They were his guides, his teachers, leading him through a world that was both beautiful and terrifying. There was one horse, in particular, that stood out. A deep bay mare with a white blaze down her forehead, named Tempest. She was strong, graceful, and unyielding, her movement smooth and effortless as she navigated the toughest terrain. But there was something else about her, an aura of calm, of quiet strength. It was as if she knew something Alex didn't. In many ways, Tempest became his anchor. When fear crept in, when doubt started to rise, she was always there, steady beneath him, guiding him through. It wasn't long before Alex began to understand the subtle language of the horses. It was more than just a series of whinnies and neighs. It was a complex system of body language, the flick of an ear, the tilt of a head, the shift in posture. He learned when to push forward, when to pull back, and most importantly, when to listen. But the forest still held its mysteries. It wasn't enough just to ride through it or learn from the horses. Alex had to understand why the creatures, those dark, shadowy figures, were so determined to make him their prey. He spent hours researching, reading old journals and accounts of past forest rangers who had disappeared under strange circumstances. The more he read, the more he realized that there was something ancient and malevolent at work here. The forest wasn't just a home for wild animals. It was a sanctuary for something darker, something older than humanity itself. The breakthrough came one night, when Alex and Tempest rode deep into the forest, further than they had ever gone before. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a soft glow over the path ahead. As they rode, Alex felt the familiar tug of unease in his chest. The forest was watching him again. But this time, he wasn't as afraid. He had grown stronger, more in tune with the horses, and he knew that whatever lay ahead, he could face it. And then, they found it. A clearing, unlike any Alex had ever seen before. The trees were arranged in a perfect circle, the trunks twisted and gnarled, as though they had been shaped by some unseen force. In the center of the circle stood a stone altar, covered in ancient runes, its surface weathered by time. It was here that the creatures had come from, Alex realized. This was the heart of the forest, the source of the darkness that had been creeping into his life. As he dismounted, Tempest stood beside him, her ears flicking in every direction. Alex could feel the tension in the air, thick and oppressive. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. He reached out, his hand hovering over the stone altar. The air around him seemed to shimmer, and a voice, soft, barely a whisper, echoed in his mind. "You are not welcome here." Alex froze. The voice wasn't coming from any living creature. It was as if the forest itself was speaking to him. His heart raced, and for a moment, all he wanted to do was turn and run. But he couldn't. Not now. Not after everything he had learned. "You will be the one to change the balance," the voice continued, this time clearer, more insistent. "You are the key." Alex's breath caught in his throat. What did that mean? How could he be the key? And what balance was the voice talking about? There were too many questions, too many unknowns. Tempest snorted, her body stiffening. Alex could feel her unease, her fear. It was as though the forest itself had sensed his presence and was reacting to it. The air grew heavier, and the shadows seemed to lengthen around them, stretching like dark fingers ready to snatch them both away. But instead of running, Alex stayed still, his mind racing. He was ready to face whatever the forest had in store for him. This was the moment of truth. This was where everything would change. Alex stood in the heart of the clearing, the stone altar cold beneath his fingers, his mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. The voice, whatever it was, had spoken to him, warning him of his role in something bigger than he could comprehend. His pulse quickened as the weight of the moment sank in. This wasn't just about surviving in the forest anymore. It was about a force far beyond his understanding, something ancient and powerful that had been lurking for generations, waiting for the right person to awaken it. Tempest snorted beside him, her body stiff with tension. She pawed the ground nervously, her eyes scanning the darkening trees. Something was watching. Something was waiting. Alex could feel it. The air around him hummed with an unsettling energy, a pulse that matched the rhythm of his own heartbeat. It was as if the forest had come alive, each tree, each leaf, each shadow holding its breath in anticipation. The voice echoed in his mind once again, sharp and commanding. "You must choose. You must face what lies beneath. Or you will become part of it." Alex swallowed hard. The warning was clear. The forest was not a place to be taken lightly. It was a living, breathing entity, and it had its own rules, its own ancient power. But what did it mean, face what lies beneath? And how was he supposed to fight something he didn't understand? Tempest shifted restlessly, her hooves scraping against the stone. She wasn't just nervous, she was afraid, and Alex could sense that fear. The horses had been his protectors up until this point, guiding him through the forest and showing him the way, but now, it seemed, they too were uncertain. The forest's power was something neither Alex nor the horses could fully grasp. He took a deep breath, his hand still resting on the cold surface of the altar. He felt the ground beneath him shift, as though the earth itself was waking from a long slumber. The trees groaned, their branches creaking in the wind, and for a moment everything was still. Alex had never felt so small, so insignificant, in the face of something so vast and mysterious. Yet, deep down, he knew he couldn't walk away. Not now. Not after everything he had learned. "Choose," the voice said again, its tone softer this time, almost coaxing. "Will you protect the balance, or will you be consumed by it?" The words felt like a challenge, a dare. But Alex couldn't back down. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore, he was fighting for the horses, for the forest, and for everything that was at stake. The Thoroughbreds had shown him their loyalty and strength, and now it was his turn to show the forest what he was made of. A sudden rustling in the underbrush broke his thoughts, and Tempest tensed. She turned sharply, her ears flicking forward as her nostrils flared. Alex followed her gaze into the darkness of the trees. Something was moving there, something big. The hair on the back of his neck stood up as he realized they weren't alone. Before he could react, a figure emerged from the shadows, a massive, dark shape that moved with an unnatural fluidity. It was like nothing Alex had ever seen before, tall, with elongated limbs, its features obscured by the dim light. But the eyes, those eyes, glowed with an eerie, unnatural light, and they fixed on Alex with an intensity that made his heart skip a beat. The creature was a part of the forest, Alex realized, just as the horses were. But this thing was different. This was the darkness, the malevolent force that had been hidden in the depths of the woods for so long. The air around them seemed to warp, distorting as the creature took a step forward. Tempest snorted, rearing back on her hind legs, but Alex grabbed the reins, forcing her to stay calm. He needed to stay focused. This was the moment when he would either crumble in fear or rise to the challenge. The creature tilted its head, its glowing eyes narrowing as it took another step closer. Alex's breath caught in his throat. There was no turning back now. "Protect the balance," the voice echoed in his mind once more. "You are the key. This is your fight." Tempest's muscles tensed beneath him as the creature advanced, its steps silent but sure. Alex could feel the ground tremble beneath his feet, the very earth trembling as if it were alive, responding to the presence of this dark force. He had no weapons. He had no plan. But he had something the creature didn't, the horses and the bond he had formed with them. Without thinking, Alex spurred Tempest forward. The mare launched into action, her hooves pounding the earth as they charged toward the creature. But just as quickly, the darkness shifted, blurring and morphing, its form becoming less solid, more like smoke, until it was nothing but a shadow that swirled around them, twisting and contorting in the air. Alex's mind raced. He had to do something, but what? This wasn't a creature that could be fought with brute force. This was a force of nature, something ancient and powerful, beyond anything he could physically defeat. But there had to be another way, something he could do to stop it. Then it clicked. The forest wasn't just a place of danger, it was a place of power, a place that could be harnessed. The horses knew this. They understood the forest's rhythm, its pulse. And now, Alex had to do the same. With a sudden understanding, he leaned forward, his fingers tight around the reins. He wasn't just riding Tempest anymore. He was becoming one with her, syncing his movements with hers, feeling the beat of the forest beneath them. He could hear the trees whispering, their voices just on the edge of his perception, guiding him. The creature lunged, but this time, Alex was ready. He urged Tempest forward, and in that instant, everything aligned. The horses, the forest, the creature, and Alex himself. Time seemed to slow, and Alex felt a surge of energy flow through him, something primal and ancient, as though the very essence of the forest was awakening within him. Tempest leaped forward with incredible speed, and Alex reached out, not with his hands, but with his heart. He felt the creature's darkness closing in, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he focused on the connection between himself and the horses, the bond that had grown stronger with every passing day. And then, just as the creature reached him, there was a flash of light, a burst of energy that seemed to emanate from the stone altar. The creature screamed, its form disintegrating into the shadows, vanishing into the forest as quickly as it had come. Alex and Tempest stood there, breathless and trembling, the clearing silent once more. The air felt different now, lighter, as though the balance had been restored. For the first time, Alex truly understood what the voice had meant. He wasn't just a man in the woods. He was a part of it, part of something far bigger than himself. But even as the shadows retreated, Alex knew this was only the beginning. The forest had shown him what he was capable of, but there were more challenges to come. The balance had been restored, for now. But how long would it last? Alex stood in the center of the clearing, his body still trembling from the intensity of what had just transpired. Tempest was equally shaken, but her breathing was steady, her eyes alert, scanning the horizon as if she were waiting for the next danger to emerge. But for now, all was quiet. The forest around him was still. The air, once thick with tension, now seemed to pulse with something else, a sense of calm, as if the very earth had exhaled a deep breath it had been holding for centuries. The darkness that had threatened to consume them was gone, but the scars of the battle remained. Alex could feel them, deep within himself, in his bones, in his soul. The fight had changed him, just as it had changed the forest. For a long moment, he stood there, unsure of what to do next. The clearing, once filled with chaos, was now peaceful. The eerie glow that had enveloped the place was gone, leaving only the soft light of the moon filtering through the trees. The horses stood beside him, their heads low, their bodies relaxed, as if they too were finally free from the shadow that had hung over them. But Alex knew better. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. The creature may have been vanquished, but the darkness it represented still lingered, woven into the very fabric of the forest. There was more to be done. There was more Alex had yet to learn, and more challenges that would test not only his strength but his very understanding of the forest's ancient power. Tempest nudged him with her muzzle, as if sensing his thoughts. Alex stroked her neck gently, grateful for her presence, for the bond they had forged in the heat of battle. She had been his guide, his protector, his partner. Together, they had faced the unknown, and together, they had emerged victorious. But there was still so much more to uncover. He turned toward the stone altar once more, his fingers tracing the edges of the cold, weathered surface. The symbols carved into it seemed to glow faintly, their meaning still elusive. What had the voice meant when it said, "You are the key"? What was his role in all of this? Alex wasn't sure, but one thing was clear: he had been chosen for something greater than himself. The forest had tested him, and he had passed, but the trials were far from over. "Tempest," he said softly, his voice breaking the silence. "This isn't the end. It's just the beginning." The mare snorted, her tail flicking as she turned her head toward him, her eyes wise beyond her years. She understood. She always had. And she was ready for whatever came next, as long as they faced it together. As they stood in the clearing, Alex couldn't help but wonder how many others the forest had chosen before him. How many had failed, and how many had succeeded. What was it about him that had made him the one? There was so much more to discover, and he knew that the forest would reveal its secrets when the time was right. In the distance, a rustling sound broke the stillness. Alex's heart skipped a beat, his instincts immediately alert. But it wasn't the creature returning. It was something else. A new presence. He turned, his hand instinctively going to Tempest's reins as the horses tensed. From the shadows of the trees, a figure emerged, a man, tall and cloaked in a dark robe. His face was hidden in the folds of his hood, but his eyes, those eyes, glowed with the same unnatural light Alex had seen in the creature moments before. Alex's breath caught in his throat. Was this another challenge? Another test of his strength? The man spoke, his voice deep and resonant, carrying an authority that sent a shiver down Alex's spine. "You have done well, Alex," he said, his voice carrying an unsettling calmness. "But the true test is yet to come." Before Alex could respond, the man raised his hand, and the ground beneath them shifted once more. The forest seemed to groan in response, as if it were waking from a deep slumber. The trees around them rustled, and the shadows stretched longer, darker. Alex didn't know what this new figure wanted, but one thing was certain: his journey was far from over. The challenges would only grow greater, the stakes higher. But with Tempest by his side, he was ready for whatever lay ahead. The forest had called to him, had tested him, and now it was offering something more, a chance to embrace his destiny. He didn't know where this path would lead, but he knew one thing: he wouldn't face it alone. The figure in the cloak stood before Alex, his eyes burning with an unsettling intensity, yet there was no malice in his gaze. For a brief moment, the forest seemed to hold its breath as the shadows stretched and the wind whispered through the trees. Tempest shifted uneasily beside Alex, her ears flicking back in caution, but she didn't move. They were ready. Alex was ready. The man's deep voice broke the silence once more. "You think you've completed the trials, Alex. But you've only scratched the surface. What you've witnessed here is but a fragment of a much larger story, one that's been unfolding for centuries." Alex felt a surge of unease, but he stood tall, his heart steady. He had faced the unknown before, and he would do it again. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice firm despite the rising tension. The man's lips curled into a slight smile, his face still hidden beneath his hood. "I am but a messenger. And you, Alex, are the one the forest has chosen. Chosen to protect it, to unlock its secrets, to ensure its survival." The weight of his words hit Alex like a tidal wave. Protect the forest. Unlock its secrets. The idea felt too big, too heavy for him to bear. But in the pit of his stomach, he knew this was his purpose. This was what he had been called for, though the exact details were still unclear. The man stepped closer, lowering his hood to reveal his face, a face that seemed older than time itself, his skin marked with ancient symbols that glowed faintly. His eyes, however, were the most striking, piercing and ageless, like two pools of liquid fire. "You have proven yourself," the man continued, his voice echoing in the silence. "But now, you must decide. Will you accept the full weight of this responsibility? Will you stand by the forest and fight for its future?" Alex swallowed, his mind racing. He had never asked for any of this. He had come to the forest to escape, to find peace, not to be thrust into something greater. But deep down, he knew that this wasn't just a choice, it was his destiny. He couldn't turn away. "I accept," he said quietly, his voice steady. He knew that this was the right decision, even if it was terrifying. The man's smile deepened, and for the first time, Alex saw a flicker of approval in his eyes. "Good. The path ahead will be fraught with challenges, but you will not walk it alone. Tempest will be by your side. And so will the forest, in its own way." With those words, the man stepped back, his form beginning to dissolve into the shadows, merging with the trees. As he faded from view, the air grew still once more, and the clearing returned to its peaceful, silent state. But Alex knew things would never be the same. The forest had chosen him, and now there was no turning back. He looked down at Tempest, who stood beside him, her head turned toward the dark expanse of trees, as if she too understood the gravity of the moment. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they would protect the forest, uncover its secrets, and fight for its future. And as Alex took one final look at the forest that had shaped him, he knew that this was just the beginning. The true test had yet to come.